Hi, this is Dr. Kimberley Linert, and you're listening to Incredible Life Creator Podcast. My guest today is Una Doyle. Una Doyle is an international speaker, trainer, and coach. As the founder of CreativeFlow, she is on a mission to help SMB leaders to transform their businesses through the power of productive, profitable, engaged, and in-flow teams who take ownership and are agile in the face of change. She's big on creating extreme alignment and accountability and is a big believer in the power of individual mindset change as part of successful organizational change. Una has worked on major cultural and change initiatives with companies such as Argos and Network Rail, as well as some local authorities. Her largest speaking audience to date is over 2,000 Asda-Walmart head office staff, and she regularly shares her knowledge and insights through online events and video. She is a graduate from the University of Leeds Business School, where she focused on change management. Subsequently, Una trained in life coaching, strategic business coaching, and entrepreneurially-focused personal profiling. Una is also the founder and host of the Business Impact Book Club, where attendees can discover, discuss, and apply the best business ideas, principles, and practices from top authors. This helps them make a bigger impact in their role and organization, and through the baked-in giving to worthy, empowered projects, make a bigger impact on the world too. Welcome to the podcast, Una.
Thank you so much for having me.
Yes. So just loving your hair today. I am a color person. So beautiful. So thank you.
I do love bright colors.
Yes. Thank you so much for coming on. And just so people can get to know you, why don't you start out by telling us your story, where you grew up, how you got to where you are today?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, that's a lot of years to cover, but I'll keep it brief. Yeah, I grew up just on the outskirts of Dublin in a lovely place called Malahide. It was on the sea. There was a castle and grounds, and it had a kind of small town, villagey feel, yet was very close to the metropolis of Dublin. And when I was just coming up to 20, I came to the UK for a job, which I only planned to be here for 6 months. Mm-hmm. And I just kind of ended up staying. So here I am. I'm now living, I spent a lot of that time in Leeds in Yorkshire, also in the north of England. And now I live in Lancashire, which is in the northwest of the UK. So very scenic, but it rains a lot.
Wow. So what kind of job did you come for and what made you stay?
I actually was an air hostess, so cabin crew. And it was really funny because I never actually had planned, like I didn't dream of being an air hostess when I grew up. And it just wasn't even in my radar at all. But I had this best friend who was doing the job and she hated it. And she kept saying, "Oh, I hate this job, but you'd be really good at it." And I was job hunting. I had a job that I liked. It was just an office job. I had this job and I was going, I was really bored. Mm-hmm. So I was looking through the papers and one day there was this advertisement for cabin crew. So I thought, oh, wow, okay. So I applied, never heard anything. Now, my colleague in the office, one day she said to me, "Whatever happened with that air hostess job you applied for?" And I was like, "Oh, I never heard anything." And this was back in the day when people did used to actually reply when you applied for a job. We're going back a few years. And she said, "Oh, call them up." And I said, "Oh no, their head office is in the UK. How can I call them when I'm at home? Their office is closed." And she said, "Oh, you can use the phone here. We've loads of suppliers in the UK. They'll never know." So I rang them, and it was so funny because the woman, I guess this is the thing with having a name that's a little bit more unusual, because even though my name is Irish, it's actually unusual even in Ireland. I've only met a handful of other Unas in my lifetime. So when I rang up and she said, Una, that rings a bell. And she opened a filing cabinet and I could hear the rustle of her going through the files. She comes back on the phone and she said, "Oh yes, we invited you for an interview at such and such a hotel in Dublin on this date." I went, "Oh, well, I never got the letter." And she said, "Well, we're interviewing in Leeds tomorrow. Can you come?" And I just said, "Yes." No idea. And like, they were going to fly me over and everything. So, so anyway, in the interview, they kind of had us doing some math tests and some English tests. And then we had this big, they eliminated some people at that point. And then they'd all of us in this one big room. I think there must have been about 50 or 60 of us. And everyone had to stand up and say something about themselves. And I was just so engrossed in what everyone else was saying. I didn't prepare anything. So when it came to my turn, I stood up and I said, hello, my name's Una. I've flown over from Dublin this morning to be here today. I'd never flown before, but luckily I liked it. Well, the whole room collapsed laughing. They thought I wasn't trying to be funny. I was just, being myself. So yeah, so that's, I went home with a job offer and moved over 3 weeks later. And I think I stayed because of, partly because of a guy, but actually really, it didn't occur to me to leave. The company actually went bust a year later. And I had enjoyed doing the work, and I had actually been, it was so funny how things show up. Your strengths show up again and again and again in different guises in your life, So you're nodding. I can see that you know that, Kimberly. And I actually had when we were working on the jets, there was 3 cabin crew. And so you would have the number one, and then you would have the other 2 people. And the number one was responsible for you. So she was like a manager and would train you and things like that. But I often found myself training the other people because sometimes the number one was really busy doing paperwork, or the pilot or co-pilot needed something. And so I actually had been kind of tipped that, oh, they're going to promote you. They're just waiting for you to be 21 years old because that's because of the regulations. They like them to be at least 21 years old. But they went bust just before my birthday.
Oh, no.
Yeah. And then it was funny. I kind of went through doing sales and then marketing, and through marketing got into, I did a business degree then as a mature student. And that in itself was a massive learning journey. And in fact, really doing that degree sparked so many things in my life, even though the degree itself I've actually never really used. But going through that, it gave me confidence, how I was in the classes and the feedback I got from other people. What that did mean is that the marriage I was in at that time, funnily enough, the guy who I'd been dating at the end of my year as an air hostess, he was an aircraft mechanic. Things were starting to fall apart because I was growing as a person. And that wasn't okay with him, because back then I had very low self-esteem and I was a real people pleaser. So I would twist myself in knots trying to please people, trying to figure out what do they want? Like, what do they want me to be? I could be anything. And I would, make myself do that. So it was interesting that doing the degree kind of sparked a lot of things for me. And then I ended up going in-house working on the change programs where I was doing internal communications with employees and employee engagement and change management type things. And at the same time was having my own massive personal journey of transformation, where I got my first experiences of doing personal development workshops and having a coach. And then I decided, well, I just love this. I want to help other people in this way too. And so I trained as a coach, left and set up my own business. So that's how I kind of ended up doing that. And that was, gosh, over 17 years ago now. Back in the days when I would go to a networking event and people would say, what's a coach? They didn't even know. Whereas thankfully now, I think it's a lot more widespread. Most people have an idea, certainly in business circles anyway, have an idea of what a coach is and how they might be able to help. So that's kind of how I ended up where I am here today.
Wow. Yeah. And just talk about the importance of having a coach, because I know throughout my life I've had many coaches. In fact, I actually am just about to start with a new coach for working on something else.
Well, I think a good way to look at it is Olympic athletes. They are at the top of their game. They're the people who are most advanced in their sports. They've got to the Olympics. And they usually have a whole team of coaches that specialize. They've got someone who specializes in nutrition. They've got someone who specializes in mindset. They've got someone who specializes in certain techniques for their sport. They might have multiple people that actually coach them on different aspects of whatever it is that they're competing in. And they don't say, oh, well, I've got to this point now, I don't need any help or support. Mm-hmm. So if they don't say that, then, and they're at the top of their game, then for those of us who want to be at the top of our game, having the help and support of a coach or mentor is really important. And I think what is also important is to understand how to find the right coach for you as well. Yeah. Because not everybody is going to be a good fit, and everybody has got different ideas of what coaching is and how to work with it. So for instance, when I trained originally, I was trained in what is called coactive coaching, which is coming from the perspective that the client always has the answer. But I very quickly found that the client did not always have the answer. Right. So I changed that pretty quickly and started building frameworks and methodologies to help my clients achieve their aims. So very much and there are coactive coaches out there, and for some people that will be exactly what they want and what they need at that time. But that's not me. Mm-hmm. I'm going to usually bring you through some kind of a structure, because and it's really interesting, as someone who is a creative person, I actually really, really resisted structure. When I left corporate world, I took off my watch and was like, I don't have to wear a watch anymore. I can do my own thing whenever I want. This is awesome.
Yes. Yes.
Now you might be going, Una, that suspiciously looks like a watch. It is actually a Fitbit. And that is actually the first time I did put a watch back on, was when I got a Fitbit. But the Fitbit gives me structure to help me to track how many steps am I doing every day. And that's the thing, I resisted structure for so many reasons. And I think it was partly because it didn't come naturally to me, partly because of self-sabotage, and partly because just people hadn't shown me how. I came into the business world thinking, oh, well, I've worked in marketing, I've done sales before, I know how to coach and all of that this is going to be great. And I hit a lot of roadblocks.
Yeah.
Because of those things. So yeah, I had to learn how to put structure, and actually structure really helps with flow. Mm-hmm. Because if you think about a river, then a river has got banks at the side, and they contain the volume of water. And if the banks aren't robust enough, then you're going to end up with a flood when the volume of water increases. And this happens a lot for people in their businesses, where they end up overwhelmed. There's a flood because they actually don't have robust enough structures in their business.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that makes total sense, because it's just so easy, especially I think for creatives. We get so into what we're doing that we can just be all over the place, and we don't even notice what time. At least I don't. When I'm doing art, I do not notice what time it is, and I'll look and go, oh man, I have to get up early in the morning, and it's like 1:30 in the morning because I was just painting. I didn't notice that the time was going by. And so, yeah, and it affects other parts. So then it affects my day the next day. So I'm kind of tired.
Yes, absolutely. And it's interesting you talk about that, not noticing the time going by, because that is one of the criteria of knowing that you're in flow, is because you just lose all sense of time. In fact, research has shown that when people are in a deep flow state, they actually lose sense of geography as well. So they did studies with brain scans with nuns and some other meditators, And they found that the part of the brain that kind of helps us to understand where we are, it switched off when they got into a deep flow state. Now, that would be, of course, flow will look slightly different for different people. So if you have an athlete in flow, they probably would be hyper aware of where they are, but more unconsciously as well. So it's going to be slightly different for what activities that you're doing. But that sense of being really engrossed, that sense of being so focused on what you're doing that everything else around you just melts away, that's that wonderful feeling of flow that people often associate with a hobby or with art and being creative. Yet actually we can achieve that in our businesses as well, as long as you kind of go about it the right way. And I think one of the other parts of that that's very important is that you cannot be in flow and stressed in the same moment.
Oh, that's a good point. I never even thought about that. You really can't.
No, because that inner voice that so many people have, that inner critic, which often says things like, you're not good enough, or who do you think you are? Any of those kinds of negative, that quietens down when you're in flow. All your brain power is focused on what it is that you are doing because it comes easily to you. The reason for that, it's part of your natural strengths.
Yes, yes. And when I think of those times when I'm doing my painting or when I'm in flow, I think of it kind of as a vacation from life. Because everything falls away. The things you were worried about just don't seem to exist, at least for that moment that you're in it. So it's a very healthy way as opposed to going for drinking or alcohol or some
Absolutely.
other way to kind of numb yourself out. If you can actually take your energy and go into flow, it's so healthy, and not only healthy but beneficial, and you come up feeling better and probably doing a lot better afterwards.
Definitely. The more time we can spend in flow, the more our lives and our experience of our lives improves. So in fact, I've got a question for you and for your listeners, which is, if you think back over the last 3 months, what score would you give yourself for the level of flow that you have experienced on average over the last 3 months, between 0 to 10, where 0 is totally out of flow and 10 is absolutely, I've been in flow so much, I don't think I could be any more in flow?
I would be near the lower end, I think.
Okay.
Yes, yes, this podcast has taken off and I really just love doing it. But I also have a full-time job right now. And so doing a podcast at 7 a.m. in the morning and then coming home from work and doing an 8 o'clock one and then doing them all day on Wednesday, which is my day off. I love it when I'm doing it, but then I'm not so much in flow when I'm at work because I'm thinking, oh, I have more things to do when I get home. So,
And possibly there's a mismatch between your natural strengths and what your core purpose is in your role in the day job. And this happens a lot. And if you think about when you're in school and you don't score well on something, what happens? Like, maybe you get a tutor. There's a focus on fixing your weaknesses, even in most corporate life. You think about job appraisals, and they often will keep bringing up the same things again and again and again, appraisal after appraisal after appraisal. So if something like that is happening, then you've got to be asking yourself, well, hang on a minute, if this is a critical part of this job, I'm not getting any better at it. This is clearly a weakness of mine. And if I try and fix this, it's almost like, in fact, if you imagine, and you've got this beautiful scene behind you, but imagine that your strengths are in front of you, and imagine your weaknesses are behind you. Turn around and start focusing on your weaknesses.
it doesn't feel good.
Well, but what you're literally doing, if you do that, is you are turning your back on your strengths.
Oh, yes, yes.
Yet that is actually what most educational systems and a lot of business organizations will have you do because they don't know any better. And they will often have, particularly in larger organizations, they'll have competency frameworks. But you know what? We can all be competent at pretty much anything, you know, given a basic level of intelligence and a willingness to have a go. But that's not the same as being in flow.
Mhm.
You can work so hard trying to get better at something that is out of flow for you, and you make like a teensy improvement.
Mhm.
Yet you put a fraction of that effort into becoming better at something that is a natural strength for you,
Mhm.
and you make exponential improvements.
That makes so much sense. So, when you're working with a company, let's say they have someone that, and I was actually talking to my friend that he's in charge of some people, and this same gentleman kept doing the same things over and over again, and he kept saying, if you don't change this, you can't stay here. Basically,
Mm-hmm.
and it ended up that he actually did end up getting fired because he wasn't correcting it. So let's say that we want to hold on to our employees because
Mm.
it's expensive to lose an employee, and there was good things about them and there's good things about their work, or we wouldn't have them there. So how can we maybe place them or do something different?
Well, there's the number one thing is to get really clear on everybody's strengths. So when I do workshops with teams, what's amazing is that not only does it help to overcome some interpersonal issues, because people suddenly realize, oh, so when you do da 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 da, you're not doing that to pay me off. No. Oh, okay. Well, that's just who they are. You actually get different team members going, oh, okay, so actually, if I was to spend more time doing this, but this bit is really out of flow for me, and someone else pipes up and is going, well, can I do that? I'd love to do that.
Mhm.
You know, would that be okay? And so you start having these like, and it's not necessarily like a total restructure that you've got to get HR involved in and things, but it's often little tweaks that actually just make such a difference. And it's rare that you would get someone have their whole job be 100% in flow. Yes, if your flow score is like a 3 or a 4 and you can get that to a 7 or an 8, I guarantee you your life will feel 10 times better.
Mhm. Yeah, and that makes sense because I know even when I was running my business, 80 to 90% of it I loved. And the 10% where I had to do paperwork, which was not ever, still is not my
Mm-hmm.
favorite thing, but the regulation, the paperwork has to be done. You know, I'm willing to take that little bit of discomfort or the part that I don't like so that I can get 90% of what I do like.
Exactly. Yes. And even just, I've had so many clients say to me, knowing that this isn't in flow for me, but I'm the one who needs to do it, you know, it's something that maybe can't be delegated. I'm okay doing it because A, the way we've structured their time, they know the next thing they go on to is going to be much more enjoyable for them.
Mhm.
And they don't beat themselves up for not enjoying it. I mean, one of the other benefits of people really understanding how to be in flow is that a lot of the time it becomes clear why they've been procrastinating over something. Now, when I'm working with my clients, I'm working at it from two angles. One is flow and the other is mindset.
Mhm.
So, for instance, in the example of your friend who's a manager that ended up having to fire this guy, it could have been a mindset pattern that was the issue. It might not have been their capability and fit with that role. So one of the great things is that when you understand what has people in flow and you understand what makes a good role fit for them, then it's much easier to be able to diagnose, well, this issue here is an attitude problem, or this issue is a mindset problem. Because a mindset problem is where they're happy to change but aren't able to.
Yeah.
An attitude issue is they don't want to change. So those are the people you do often have to wave goodbye to. And with the role fit, given the, apologies for that, the role fit, given an understanding of what has somebody in or out of flow, means that you're able to fix that. If you have some other ways that you can tweak things within the team or even between teams and divisions, etc. And worst case scenario, somebody will actually self-select and go, do you know what? I'm not a good fit here. And you can support them in exiting the company in a way that there's a proper handover done, that you help them to find a place where they actually really can be successful. Because as a manager, as a leader, you want to be setting up every person in your team for success.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, that's the goal, because again, if you invited them to come into the company, there was some really great traits that they have. So just finding where they can fit. And then I expect that the workplace is a much happier place, a more calm, peaceful place when everyone is working in their flow.
Absolutely. Absolutely. It is a big contributor to that. Also, productivity improves. The speed of workflow increases. Typically, when I work in a business, we'll be in a one-day workshop where flow is kind of built into everything that we're doing. We'll be able to identify a minimum of £100,000, so that's probably a few more dollars, of additional revenues or savings. So multiply that across a number of teams, and then you see massive improvements in what actually can be achieved. And when somebody is in flow, why would they want to leave? Apart from those odd situations where maybe they're moving to another part of the country, or they have some big life change happen and they want, something else is more important to them in their career, or maybe there just isn't the room for them to grow any further within your organization. But that's okay. That's a great reason for somebody to be moving on. So if you want to keep your best talent, and in fact, if you want to attract the best talent, then having team members that are in flow means that they are going out there as your brand ambassadors. And they're talking about how great it is to work in this place, and they get to do work they're proud of every day.
Yeah, and that's self-evident. For a while, I was working in a small town as an optometrist, and there were some employees from this local, really manufacturing company that they manufactured these big canisters, like really big canisters, and as they flowed through the practice, every one of them, when I'd ask them, what do you do? Where do you work? They would proudly say the name of the company. They would tell me exactly what their job is, what they did, and how it fit, and how they're doing this amazing job of creating these huge canisters that go all over the world. I mean, every one of them came in like that. And I'm like, wow, that was a great job of getting everyone in flow on the same purpose, because they are proud and know what their contribution is.
Absolutely. And what's really key about that, I bet the leadership team of that business was in total alignment. Because you can have a person in flow in their job role and the team be in flow, yet if the leadership team isn't in alignment on important issues, then that can actually cause rifts. It can cause politics to be going on and kind of team silos. A typical one is where you get the salespeople complaining about the accounts people and the accounts people complaining about the salespeople. And that's often because their leaders are pulling them in different directions. So the leadership team, not only do they need to each understand how they can be in flow as a team, they also need to be in agreement. They need to work out the dysfunctions that so many teams experience. Do you know, so many times I have talked on this subject and I say, how many people here have worked in a dysfunctional team? And pretty much every hand goes up. Mm-hmm. And I did one earlier this year before all the lockdown happened. It was in person. I had a room full of people there. It was great. And because we were workshopping certain bits, and I suddenly just said to the audience, how many people here have ever left a job because of team dysfunction? And half the room put up their hand.
Wow. So how do you get, first of all, how do you get the leadership in alignment?
Well, the key thing is really about, you've got to build that cohesive team first. So that's partly about overcoming the 5 dysfunctions of a team. So these are an absence of trust. It's about fear of conflict. That's about a lack of commitment, an avoidance of accountability, and inattention to results. And let me break each one of those things down a little bit more. So a lot of the time you'll get a team saying, oh, but we do trust each other. And they've got to know each other. They like each other. They might actually get on really, really well. Yet they don't have vulnerability-based trust. Mm-hmm. So vulnerability-based trust is where somebody can go, I've made a mistake. Mm-hmm. Or they go, actually, I need some help with this. And in too many leadership teams, people are afraid to do that. And they're afraid to do that because they haven't built that vulnerability-based trust with each other. Mm. You cannot have egos, infighting, people trying to outdo each other on a team and have that team be cohesive. Mm. They need to feel safe to be vulnerable. So that's the kind of real foundation with that. You see, once then they feel vulnerable, they feel safe being vulnerable, and they have that vulnerability-based trust, then they're able to have conflict. Have you ever sat in a meeting where somebody is trying to achieve consensus and they end up not making a decision, and they put the decision off and it goes to the next meeting, and then it goes around and it goes to the next meeting? And you end up with either really poor decisions being made or decisions constantly being put off because people don't debate the important issues. The moment that things become a bit heated, people get uncomfortable, they step back, they're worried about what other people are going to think. Whereas actually what you want is you want a team to be dramatic, not in an ego-driven way, but in a passionate way, where they are having unguarded debate, where they have that foundation of vulnerability trust that they know if they do mess up a little bit, if they do go a little bit too far, that it'll be okay. And that's important because when people don't have that unguarded debate, when they don't get to air their opinions, where they don't get to listen and to discuss other people's opposing views and figure out what the best way forward is, how can you possibly have commitment? Mm. People don't commit to things that they haven't contributed to things that they don't believe in. Mm. And if people don't commit, how can you hold them accountable? Have you ever been in the shower trying to grab onto a piece of soap? And it just goes shoop out of your hands. That is what it is like trying to hold somebody accountable who hasn't actually committed.
Yeah.
Right? So I don't know if you've ever been in a meeting where as you're walking out of the meeting, you can hear people muttering, oh yeah, that doesn't apply to me.
Yes, yes.
It's like, well, hang on a minute. No, it applied to everybody in the meeting, but they haven't committed. And they probably didn't commit because they might have been sat there with their arms crossed going, well, that isn't going to work. But they don't share why.
Mm-hmm.
And so then, because people don't share why something won't work, things are implemented that don't work. And then they're the big I am of, well, yeah, I knew that wasn't going to work.
Mm-hmm.
I was like, oh, why didn't they speak up at the time? Now, they might not have spoken up because they're disengaged
Mm-hmm.
from the company. They might not have spoken up because they actually were fearful. Perhaps there's one or more dominant people on the team
Mm-hmm.
that they felt they wouldn't get heard or it wasn't safe for them to speak up. But then that brings us back down the dysfunctions to that vulnerability-based trust.
Mm-hmm.
So, and then if you don't have accountability, and this is not just accountability from a manager to a team member perspective, this is peer accountability. Like, can you imagine how high a team performs when they hold each other accountable?
Oh, yes, definitely. That's so important.
Yes,
Yes.
absolutely. Yeah. And the inattention to results, the fifth dysfunction, it's not about it's inattention to the group results, to the team results, to the company results. It's not about, well, I'm doing okay. It doesn't matter what everyone else is doing. I'm going to hit my targets. And I'm going to get my bonus.
I'm sure a lot of people are thinking that.
Well, they are. You see, one of the things that they don't understand is that you actually can't get into flow on your own. You can only get into flow by helping other people be in flow. And when I share this in workshops and people, they now have an understanding of their own personality profile and other people's profiles,
Mm-hmm.
they're like, oh, it is an instant paradigm shift. They never, ever look at their colleagues and their team the same way again. And that's a good thing.
Yeah, that is a good thing. So, so just to get into alignment, first your leaders have to have that trust, and they have to
Yeah.
instill that trust on the people that they're working with in their teams.
Yeah, so you build that cohesive team first, and then you're looking to create clarity. So you're creating clarity on, well, what is the purpose of this business? And I'm not talking about a kind of what I call a lipstick PR mission statement that you so often see on walls or in company reports. And you look at it and it's just jargon or meaningless. So, there definitely wasn't that in that manufacturing company you were talking about, Kimberly.
Yeah.
They had absolute clarity of what they did, why they did it, who it impacted. It had meaning for them. That's why they were so proud to work for that organization and to do the job that they did. So you've got to build a cohesive team, you've got to create clarity, and then you've got to communicate that clarity. Now, what's interesting is that most people, they communicate things once and they think that's enough, and it is not enough. So you then have to reinforce that clarity through communications, but also through the company's systems and policies, anything to do with how human beings behave, their pay, how appraisals are done, how people are hired and managed and fired. All of that has to be in alignment with the purpose of the business, the goals that it's going after, and the plans that it has.
Wow. I am learning so much, and I think that if I was in that situation, I would want a workplace where it was just like that, because it would be so much more comfortable and enjoyable to actually go to work every day if you're in a big company
Yes.
like that.
This is my vision, Kimberly,
Mm.
is to have a world where people turn up to their work and they're excited to be there. And at the end of the day, when they down their tools or turn their computer off, that they feel proud, that they've had a productive inflow day, that they've made an impact on other people. And see, then you have what I call the ripple effect. So that person feels good about themselves. And that has a ripple effect on their loved ones.
Yeah.
It also has a ripple effect on their team members. It has a ripple effect on the customers and stakeholders for that organization. It has a knock-on positive effect to the community. You know, there's so many ways that companies can make a bigger impact by having engaged teams who have real clarity, rather than, you know, one team member going, well, I've been told we have to do things this way, and another team going, well, no, that contradicts what my boss said I have to do things this way. And they're like at loggerheads with each other, instead of like they're in the same side. You know, that to actually have them working together. Imagine being in a rowing boat and having 3 people sat in that boat, and they're all trying to go in different directions. How far do you think they'd get?
Well. That definitely would not work very well.
They're probably going to capsize and sink.
Probably. Oh my gosh. So let me ask you a personal question now. What for you gives you the most happiness and fulfillment in your life?
My journey, actually. I mean, yes, working with clients is amazing. Yes, getting to speak is fantastic. Yet actually that is all part of my journey of learning how to be congruent, how to be me. And it's so interesting. A number of years ago, for a few years, I pursued an acting career part-time. It was a childhood dream I had. And I studied, I was running my business kind of part-time, doing the acting thing part-time. And so many actors were really upset when their advice when they were going to auditions, the casting director would say, oh, just be yourself. And most people have no idea who that person is. It's just meaningless for them. And so I think what's been really interesting is my journey of becoming me, from that person who had no self-esteem, who was such a people pleaser. I actually remember after I, separated from my then husband, I started counseling. I mean, I was really quite low. I even went on antidepressants for a while. And I had a counseling session. In fact, I had counseling for a few months. That was my first kind of experience of personal growth. And the counselor said to me, so why are you here? And I said something along the lines of, I feel like my life is a house of cards that the wind has come and just blown it over. And I want to rebuild my house, but with a solid foundation, that it can't be blown over, and that it has solid walls, and it has windows that I can see lovely visions through, and it has a solid roof that keeps me safe. And the counselor said to me, wow, that's really brave. But I didn't feel brave. I actually was quite petrified at that point in my life. I had a lot of fear, I can tell you. I actually just felt like I had no choice. I couldn't go on the way I was. And, that kind of started a journey for me that, that meant I was consciously looking to improve things. Whereas I think a few years before, if somebody had talked to me about doing counseling or coaching or reading any books, I would have been like, what? Oh, never mind about that. Let's go out dancing. Let's go out drinking. I just anything to and eating and anything to push down those feelings that I actually couldn't bear. And a big turning point for me actually was, I mentioned I did this degree part-time, and I lived an hour from the university. And I ended up on a Saturday morning driving into the university library to buy an accounting book. Now, I was not happy about buying this book. I had done a marketing course previously where I had done an accounting module. It was the same module, but they wouldn't give me a credit for it. So I had to repeat the module. Now, at this point, I was unhappily married. I was very overweight and really binging. I was very stressed at work. I did enjoy my job and I was in flow to a certain extent doing my job, but I was overworked. And because of all my mindset issues, it was just really, really stressful. And I was working 50, 60 hours a week, plus doing this, 2 nights a week, night school, plus study and exams, etc. And so I turn up at this shop, the library bookshop, not the library bookshop, the university bookshop. And I say, okay, can I have this book, please? And so the person goes on the computerized till and then says, oh, it's out of stock. And I was just, oh my God, this is the last straw. And I could feel myself going red in the face with embarrassment and tears coming to my eyes. And through my tears, I saw a book. I thought, oh my gosh, I recognize the name of that book. A few years previously, I had emailed my sister who lives abroad to ask her, how do I get promoted? Because she had worked her way up through the ranks and was a middle manager in a very well recognized company at the time. And I thought, well, she can help me. And she replied and said, read this book, and gave me a little synopsis. Mm-hmm. And at that point, when I saw her email, I went, oh, well, that isn't any good. It's my boss that needs to change, not me. Uh-huh. I'm not getting promoted because of my boss. So that day, when I had that last straw, I was about to burst into tears, and I saw this book, I thought, oh my gosh, this is an omen, even though I didn't even believe in omens at the time. And I bought the book, and I drove home. I went upstairs to my bedroom and started reading it. And I ended up, a couple of chapters in, I ended up running downstairs out to the back garden and throwing my arms around my then husband and apologizing for being such a cow to him, basically, because all I did was moan and complain at him and about my life and about not getting promoted and all these things. Mm-hmm. And reading that book was a massive turning point, because that was the day I took responsibility for my own life. Mm-hmm. Do you want to know what the book was?
Yeah, of course. I'm waiting thinking, when you're going to tell me the name of the book.
I have it here behind me. The book is The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People by Stephen Covey.
Yes, that's an awesome book.
Right. I actually have met his son, who wrote another amazing book called The Speed of Trust. And I was involved in an event where he was a keynote speaker, and it was my job to look after him and the other speakers that day, though mainly it was to look after him. And he was incredible, absolutely incredible. Every single person he met, he looked into their eyes, he shook their hand, he was totally 100% present with that person. It was amazing to see. And then we had a problem. No. I can't even remember what it was. This is going back a few years, but there was something, he wanted things done a certain way and something had gone wrong. It was some kind of tech snafu, or someone hadn't done something. I can't remember exactly what it was. And I was the one who had to tell him. And I'm like, oh my gosh, this is like the major keynote speaker at this event. There's hundreds of people, at this event. And when I told him what happened, I saw this flicker of annoyance on his face. And I said, so here's what we propose that we do, da-da-da-da-da-da. Mm-hmm. And so he just thought for a moment, he nodded, and he went, yes, okay, do that. Mm-hmm. And you know what happened then? Boom, it was gone. Mm. It was like it had never happened.
Wow.
Yeah. So and of course he grew up living and learning those principles of the 7 habits of highly effective people, because that was his dad.
Yes. What an amazing story. Thank you for sharing that.
Well, it comes back to what I was talking about, being your own congruent self in life and business. Mm-hmm. So I'd quite a turning point recently, actually, with that. Would you like to hear about it?
Yes, Yeah.
Okay. So what happened was, I most days I have a morning routine. It varies slightly. I like to shake it up a little bit, but generally speaking, I have some kind of meditation, journaling, learning, exercise. And this particular day I was journaling, and just as I was wrapping up, I had three words come into my head: unleashed, unapologetic, and unstoppable.
Mm.
And I thought, oh, wow, I love those words. They're amazing. And they all begin with you. And my name's Una, and it begins
Yeah.
with you. So I wrote them down quickly, and I had to go and do some other stuff. And I thought to myself, that would make a great name for a coaching program. So over the following few weeks, this started to unfold and to emerge as to what this program would be. And I was kind of going through and putting this together and going, oh, this is really exciting. You know, I'm going to launch this. But there was something niggling at me.
Uh-huh.
And I asked myself, am I being unleashed, unapologetic, and unstoppable? And I answered myself, no. I was really confused because I was like, okay, why not? I mean, I have done so much mindset work. And there's an amazing tool, by the way, that was absolutely fundamental in shifting those deep mindset patterns. And so I was like, well, why aren't I? And I just was getting a blank. So I thought, okay, well, I guess it'll come out at some point. So this was at the end of 2018. And between Christmas and New Year, I was meditating, and I did this really deep meditation, and I had this vision. I had this vision of myself, and it was weird. It was like I was in the wings of the stage, and I was in the center of the stage, and I was wearing vintage inspired, you know, like the swing dresses that go out with petticoats. And I had coral pink colored hair done in a vintage style, and I was speaking to a massive room full of women. And I thought, oh, wow. Now, actually, for several years, I had wanted to change my style, but I had no idea what to. Mm-hmm. Well, 10 days later, I was sat on the hairdresser's chair wearing my first vintage inspired dress, getting my hair dyed coral pink.
Yes, yes. One of the things that really attracted me to you was when I saw your picture online. I'm like, I got to talk to her.
I get this so much. I get it so much. And I'm not saying to people, oh, you should all go out and have some kind of unusual style and dye your hair. That's not it. But it was so interesting. When I walked in the door, I'm now married to the most amazing man, by the way. And if I hadn't made those changes, if I hadn't taken responsibility for my life, that would have never happened. Especially because I actually met him at a personal development event. Anyway, I walk in the door, and he looked at me, and his jaw just dropped. And he loved it. He absolutely loved it. And he said, I can't remember what you looked like before.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And I've had people walk up to me, and they don't even know why they want to talk to me. I think that picture that you saw, great photographer. If anyone is local to me and wants to know her, please let me know, connect with me. I'll let you know who she is. But, you know, she somehow just captured that essence in that photograph, because everybody loves that photograph. Mm-hmm. Because I'm just being me. I'm having fun. I'm being a bit cheeky, and I'm alive. You know, so my energy is kind of really coming through in that photo. And I've had, you know, today actually I posted in a group because I'm starting my own podcast, and I was looking for guests who are leading teams, you know, women who are leading teams. And I had so many people comment on the post saying, I'm not in the demographic you're looking for, but I just wanted to say, I love your energy, or I love the photo of you. And things.
Awesome.
It's that congruency. Mm-hmm. And I feel me. Mm-hmm. And that's, I want everybody to feel like themselves. And what they need to do for that is they need to, you know, figure out who they are, not the patterns and the crap that they acquired over the years, you know, that they understand their natural strengths. We all have them. You know, people focus way too much on the negative and their weaknesses. So when they understand how to get in flow, and it's a simple, you know, 5-10 minute online test that they can take that helps them to understand that, you know, it's amazing. It is life changing, and it's definitely business changing when business owners and their teams, they structure their business. You know, I talked about in the beginning about the riverbanks. When they structure their business in the ways that harness and enhance the flow, then their revenues go up and their profits go up, and it's so much easier to attract and retain the best talent, because they, you know, they want to stay, they want to be there because they're engaged. And particularly when the leadership team has worked together to become cohesive and to get clarity and to really communicate with their staff, I mean, why wouldn't everybody want to turn up to work, do a great day's job, and feel good about themselves at the end of it?
Right, absolutely. So, Una, if people wanted to get a hold of you, or, you know, why don't you tell people what your services you're offering now, how they can contact you?
Absolutely. Well, my core website is creativeflow.tv. I do actually have a free video training on flow where I go much more in depth into that. So that's creativeflow.tv, get-flow. I also am starting the podcast that I mentioned is called She Leads Business. If they go to, it's not on the menu yet, actually, this is all very new. It's launching in a couple of months. So if they go to creativeflow.tv podcast, that's there. And also there's a page with resources, and they can find out about the book club. The book club is free to attend, by the way. The flow training, that is free as well. In terms of services and what I do, so I did launch that program, Unleashed, Unapologetic and Unstoppable. And that's really aimed at the micro kind of solo business owner, where they're wanting to get ready to scale. So they've been in business, they're reasonably well established, and it's now time to ramp things up. But they maybe haven't got the right elements in place. So in Unleashed, Unapologetic and Unstoppable, we're working with what is going to have them in flow. How do they structure things that way? How do they stand out in the marketplace and differentiate themselves with what I call no-brainer offers? That when they have the right client in front of them, they're just like, yeah, absolutely, I'm in. And making sure that the way that they are putting themselves out there is in flow for them, and that what I call their sales structure that sells, you know, their sales process, that also is in flow for them. Because when people are doing things that are in flow, they don't put it off. And, you know, acquiring customers is a pretty fundamental part of being in business. So we do all of that. We have accountability. We do 90-day rounds of business planning, which and the accountability around that. And the mindset work is happening all the way through as well. So that's it's a fantastic program. You know, people have like doubled their prices. It's really important is that businesses, particularly service-based businesses at that stage, that they're not over delivering and undercharging, and way too many are. So I've had people, I mean, one of my clients, she has like, her prices are now 5 to 10 times what she was charging before, and she's getting more clients. And yet a lot of people would think, oh, if I put my prices up, I'll have less clients. Actually, the opposite is often true, particularly when you're crafting an offer like that is so totally you and your value, you know. And in fact, that's one misconception I would like to just share as well, is that sometimes people think that because what they do is easy for them, that it's not valuable. But actually the opposite is true. Like, think about it. If you were hiring a designer, would you want that designer to be in flow doing design or out of flow doing design?
Definitely in flow. Yes.
Yeah, absolutely. Anybody would when put like that. So
Mhm.
whatever they're doing that comes easily to them is actually more valuable to the client, not less. So we build all of that in. And then the other thing that I do speaking at events. So anyone who's got events that they're having, they can hire me to speak at those events to their audience and give value. I'm all really keen on that. I always want to share lots of value, whether it's a podcast or an event. I want to make sure people go away ideally doing something different, but at the very least thinking something different. And then the third aspect of what I do is working with those teams, working with the leadership team, helping them to overcome those dysfunctions, to become cohesive, to really work together as a team, and to be able to have high performing, engaged, inflow team members. And of course, that has a massive impact on the bottom line. And actually, for the business owner, if you think about so many business owners, they're going home frustrated because their employees aren't taking ownership. And they're thinking, and they might even be thinking, why aren't they doing this? We told them they were empowered, but they're not acting like it.
Mm-hmm.
And that's so much down to actually how the leadership team conducts itself.
Yeah. Wow. And you have given so much value. So thank you for being on the podcast today and for all the things you've taught us. At least you've taught me. It was a lot of it was new to me. So thank you. And I just have one last question before we get off.
Sure.
What for you would be your best advice on living an incredible, amazing life?
Oh, that is a fabulous question. Fabulous question. My number one thing would be do the inner work.
Mm-hmm.
It's not always easy, but nothing really changes in the long term if you don't do that. And when you've got the right tools, and I can share with people an amazing tool that shifts those patterns deep down, that is so much better. It's a lot easier to, I think people do a lot of things and they get frustrated because they only work for a short time and they're still left with that underlying pattern. So it's great when you can shift that, because in reality, your career or business is never going to grow any bigger than your mindset allows it to be. The second thing would be what we've talked a lot about today is discover how to get in flow. And I think a third part is about serving others, but without becoming a martyr, which brings us back to the mindset bit. So, because when you are looking to help others to be in flow, when you're just looking to help others, but without sacrificing your own needs in the process, then you actually have more to serve. You have more resources. You have the energy, you have the time, you have the finances to serve and to help other people, to give back. I actually have giving back. You mentioned it in my introduction with the Business Impact Book Club. So I actually have giving back baked into my business. And that's part of what I often help clients to do as well. I think learn how to lead others, because you've got to learn how to lead yourself first, but learning how to lead others, how to have, how to basically not tolerating dysfunctional teams or dysfunctional relationships or families, and doing what you can to actually have everybody working together in the same direction. And I think finally, I think it's really important to switch off. And so I would say have a hobby. Now, one of the amazing things that happened out of my whole image transformation is I actually started making my own vintage inspired clothes. Now, if you had told me even just a few months prior that I would end up sewing, I would have been like, what? I hate sewing. I even get my husband to sew buttons on when they fall off. That's how much I thought I hated sewing. Yet, when I changed to my new look, which is kind of an old look, then I couldn't really find what I wanted. And I started imagining altering things and creating things. And I was a bit, oh, this is a bit weird. You hate sewing. Why are you having these images in your head?
Mhm.
And I was talking about it. I was at a lunch one day, a ladies' lunch, and I was sat next to this woman who sewed and who knitted. And I told her what had been happening. And she said, oh, yes, go start sewing. That would be amazing. And I said, well, I don't even know where to start. And she said, well, can't you find some classes? And I kind of thought, duh. I'm a coach. Find a coach who's going to teach me how to sew. And I went out to the car, got on my phone, and searched for local sewing teachers. And I've had an amazing time learning, having one-to-one lessons with this woman. And she's been amazing during lockdown. We've been on WhatsApp with each other and everything. And I've made some of my own clothes. In fact, actually, I made this dress that I'm wearing now. And I've made a few other things. I've kind of got more into it this year, and I'm giving it more time. But it's brilliant. You know what you were saying about your art and how you just lose yourself? I'm like that in my sewing as well. So it's wonderful. I have a business where I spend a lot of time in flow, and then I have a hobby where I also get to be in flow.
It's so exciting. So thank you so
Yes.
much, Una. Thank you for all your advice, and it's been wonderful.
You're very welcome. It's been my pleasure.
All right, we'll talk to you again soon.